Joe Frazier was the epitome of the American dream, period. That's when you don't have anything and you rise out of the ashes to become something great. And he was admired by so many people. He made himself, you understand, nobody else made him what he was. He made himself that. You know, there's nothing artificial about it. It's the real deal. And Joe was the real deal.
He was such a wonderful guy because not only was he so giving, but Joe's one of those people, you couldn't help, after spending a few minutes with Joe Frazier, you couldn't help feeling better. He was always upbeat. I never saw him depressed. He was always upbeat, and he always made me feel better and made the people who were going to be at the event he was coming to feel better. And especially kids. He had that magical way with kids.
And first memory of Joe Frazier was just, I knew he was a Philadelphian. And, and down goes Frazier, down goes Frazier, and the fight that he had against Muhammad Ali. But more than anything, it was just the sweetness of Joe Frazier, the other side of him. And I got to know him fairly well, and I'd done several events with him. And I loved his band, and his group, Joe Frazier and the Knockouts. Nothing better than that.
I mean, he was a funny friend. He was a crazy funny friend. Joe was hilarious.
Well, the first punch that I got from George, I was a little surprised. I said, "Hey, what I'm doing down here?"
If you really knew Joe Frazier, you understand he was hilarious. I mean, he liked to have fun.
At that time, he was getting established. I mean, we didn't know where he was going, and we didn't know that he was eventually going to be the heavyweight champ. He was Joe Frazier. He was just another kid in PAL. I was sitting in my office one day in the PAL headquarters, and I received a phone call. It was that Cassius Clay was heading towards one of my PAL centers for a confrontation with Joe Frazier. And this happened to be before the championship fight. I hear a kind of noise outside, and all of a sudden, up the street, in the middle of the street, taking up the full length of the highway, about 200 people, and Cassius Clay's in front of them. Here they had marched a distance. I didn't know it at the time. They followed him, and all you could hear is, "We want Frazier. We want Frazier."
Well, I was born and raised here, and I got bitten by the Philly spirit pretty early in life. As a 10-year-old boy, I listened to Joe Frazier, that fight, the fight of the century, on my transistor radio. And so he was the biggest man in the world to me. I owned what was a successful bar in downtown Philadelphia, Irish Pub. And one of the managers said, Joe Frazier's lawyer is on the phone. I said, "Joe, what are you doing out? And why here?" He says, "Oh, I'm going to a concert down the street." And then he said, "I heard how busy this place is and how cool it is, and I wanted to come in and check it out." So I said, "Oh, I'm thrilled." So we were having fun, and then we're having a couple more drinks, and Joe says, "I'd like to sing with the band, if that's possible." I said, "Joe, it's an Irish band. They kind of just know Irish music." He said, "I can sing Irish music." So I looked at his lawyer and the guy that, sort of was in charge that night, and I said, "Can he sing?" And he said, "Oh yeah, he can sing." I said, "Irish music?" He said, "I think." So we got Joe up and went up the steps, got into the front. So again, nobody knew he was there except for that little corner where we were. Sean Fleming introduces Joe Frazier in the bar that night, heavyweight champion of the world, standing ovation, the energy levels off the charts. I don't know what this guy's going to sing. He tells me he can sing Irish music. And Next thing I know, he whispers to Sean Fleming what he wants to play. Sean tells the band, and he starts out with Mustang Sally.
I went in the Marines 7 days after my 17th birthday. And I did a year tour in Vietnam, 3rd Marine Division. I was wounded 3 times, was awarded 3 Purple Hearts and a Bronze Star for valor. And the 3rd wound, the Marines sent me home, and I entered the police academy. I made sergeant in 76, and then I was assigned to Special Victims Unit. It was called Sex Crimes at the time. And I stayed there for the rest of my career, approximately 15, 16 years, retiring in 2003 as sergeant in sex crimes. First met Champ when he was, it was probably in the 70s, and I stopped Joe on 52nd Street for a traffic violation. And I just wanted to meet him, actually. Joe was a big figure then.
Baby, my loving is like TNT. If you don't believe me, try me and see. Whatever is.
Buford at the time only had 6 physicians, all general practitioners, no specialists. And again, my father generally picked up the poorer families and the black families on the islands and out in Burton. He took care of members of the Frazier family when I was a child. And I'll never forget that when Joe's sister's house burned down, I didn't know who Joe Frazier was at the time, but when his sister's house burned down, my siblings and I, rather than having holiday gifts, put together money and gave it to her to put her home back together after the fire.
12 or 13, he was working. Joe Frazier was working when he was 12 or 13. Like I said, he was side by side with his dad in the woods cutting wood, because there were all wood heaters back there, you know. And he would be working with his dad cutting wood. And he had to do it, either he got a fits against his head. His dad had one hand, but he could box very well with that other hand. And this is the way Joe Frazier was brought up.
He was just so caring and kind and lovable. Original. He never, when I say original, like he was like, he never changed. He always wanted, like people thought he was Joe Frazier, and I think being famous would have changed him, but he was just the same old person that when he left home.